HOGuru here with a look back at the games I sampled this week. As always, I'm giving each game a rating out of 10, based on how interested I am in coming back and playing some more of it. First up, we have Goat's Tail. Even by the standards of Rage games, this one is brutal. Players can only jump left or right at a 45-degree angle, with only the amount of power they put into the jump altering their trajectory. Every screen is designed cleverly so that any mistake will most likely take players all the way back down to the bottom. Thankfully, there's a noob mode that at least lets players see how much power they're using before they jump, but even with that, it's a punishingly difficult game, suitable only for those desperate to punish themselves for secret transgressions. 2 out of 10. Psycho Swinger. This title has some of the most basic gameplay around. Players have to move their mouse in a circle without hitting walls or obstacles. The longer they last, the higher their score. I could see playing this on a tablet while waiting in line somewhere, but as a game to be played on a computer that could also be playing House of Ashes, I don't see the value in it. 1 out of 10. Beyond the Page. In this sweet creative platformer, the player takes on the role of a young girl writing a fantasy novel, with levels alternating between her struggling to put pen to paper while dealing with stresses in her real life, and then sequences set inside the book where we get to see how she works out her traumas in the art she creates. It's pretty, it's emotionally resonant, and the gameplay is incredibly tight. I'm looking forward to seeing more of her story. 7 out of 10. Tony and Clyde. It's the Hong Kong Massacre, but for Tarantino-influenced crime fiction, without the snappy dialogue. This one is a misfire on all fronts. It wants to be a Hotline Miami-style one-hit shooter, but its wide-open levels and enemies that go on alert and attack the player from well off-screen make it nearly impossible to play like a Hotline game. Things would be a little less awful if the player had access to a slow-mo feature, like in Hong Kong Massacre, but that's nowhere to be found in the control diagram. It is in the game, however, but for some reason, it's unchangeably mapped to the B button on my Xbox controller, making it impossible to aim while using slow-mo. Also, the enemy AI has bad pathfinding, and frequently gets stuck at doorways and ramps. Just a mess all around. Oh, and here's something truly weird. On the main menu, when I'm selecting from various options, the thumbstick works normally, but the D-pad is reversed, with up being down and vice versa. Just weirdly bad. 2 out of 10. Lemuria. This game has an ambitious concept, a complex action-adventure story featuring multiple characters and diverse gameplay opportunities. But at the moment, it's a little on the rough side. Character controls are unresponsive, the animation is choppy, and when I finally got to the action, a gunfight in a motel parking lot, the sequence dragged on for 15 minutes, with a seemingly endless number of enemies spawning in to attack me, and the game offering zero suggestions about how to move the story forward. Fun fact, the motel model is the same one that appeared in Good Time and Woman, a game jam adventure that I did one of the voices for. If they can get the action to be more playable and coherent, I'll be interested in seeing more from this. But not at the moment. 3 out of 10. Phobos Subhuman Demo. A post-apocalyptic action-adventure with huge ambition. This game asks players to survive a wasteland city full of cannibals and killer robots if they want to uncover the secret behind their father's disappearance on Phobos, Mars's moon, some 20 years earlier. The combat is solid enough, and it played well on my computer, but the lack of any kind of an objective flagging system made playing the game a chore. I was sent out to wander around aimlessly in the hopes that I'd stumble onto something of value. When I did so, I found myself bedeviled by floating orbs, which can kill the player with one shot. I'd be interested in seeing the finished game, though, assuming the developers do a better job of explaining their game's mechanics and goals there. 5 out of 10. Wreckdigger. This Metroidvania has a captivating art style with solid gameplay, but it has a couple of game design choices which make it surprisingly difficult to play for such a cute little game. The first is a pretty standard one for Metroidvanias. The game doesn't do a good job of letting players know where to go next. It has a map, which is nice, but when a character says, "I'll meet you in the control room," it would be nice if the map showed where that was, so I don't spend half an hour scouring rooms I've already been in. The bigger problem, though, is that the game has a hunger meter. Go 5 minutes without eating food, and the game starts draining players' health quickly. This wouldn't be a problem if there was a lot of food around, but it was scarce on the ground. I'm guessing the developers balanced the amount of food based on the player going straight from objective to objective, but if they ever get lost or even just take a couple of hits from the game's monsters, it's easy to get trapped in a death loop, because while save stations restore a player's health, they leave their stomach empty, so it's right back to taking starvation damage. Not psyched to go back to this one unless it's rebalanced. 4 out of 10. Winter Warfare. This cold weather survival game promises commando action along with fire starting and boar hunting, but I didn't make it past the tutorial, so I can't confirm any of that. While players start the game with a knife to hack branches off of trees, they were given no similar tool to chip rocks off of the many large stones that litter the landscape. The game's second objective was to build a campfire to prevent my character from freezing to death, and doing so required 3 sticks and 3 stones. The sticks were simple, but the stones... I spent 10 minutes wandering an icy wasteland and didn't find more than 2 before freezing to death. Then I started the game over and had the exact same thing happen a second time. I don't see myself coming back to this unless the resources are completely rebalanced. Oh, and speaking of balance, the boar took an utterly preposterous 11 bullets to the head before it died. 2 out of 10. Ragtag Crew. Very similar to Rogue Lords, another Darkest Dungeon-style adventure I played this week, Ragtag Crew sends players through a desert wasteland, searching for treasure by following a map you were tricked into purchasing in a wonderfully clever tutorial. As with all games of this style, the combat is built around figuring out how to best employ each character's skills collaboratively. There's a wide variety of offensive and defensive character classes to choose from, as well as adorably grotesque monster sidekicks. The quirky writing and interesting art design impressed me, but it didn't quite rise to the level of Rogue Lords. Of course, that game had an unfair advantage in that it starred Dracula. 7 out of 10. I've been the Hidden Object Guru. Thanks for watching. If you haven't already, please remember to like and subscribe. Special thanks go out to my patrons, Marissa, Desire, Eduardo, Brian, and Joanne. If you want to support the channel, drop by the Patreon link in the description below the video. We'll see you back here when I've played some more games, but until then I'm going to say that's right, au revoir.